It is the 1939 World's Fair. With what you may have seen there quickly was this is the model of the theme center. And that's a pretty impressive piece of architecture. We'll look at it in a little more details. So the World's Fair was opened, the grand opening was on April 30th, 1939. You may remember that as the 150th anniversary of something special in your history.
The Constitution.
150th anniversary of Lincoln's declaration.
Or Washington.
You mean Washington.
Washington, sorry. And it was conceived in 1935 by some New York businessmen hoping to help the city out of its economic woes. The motto was the world of tomorrow, a futuristic theme. The key architectural highlight was this theme center that we can see, and I better there with the Trylon, the spire on the left, the Perisphere, 180-foot diameter sphere in the middle, and this Helicline, the spiral ramp that went around the outside. About 44 million visitors over 2 seasons. Albert Einstein gave a very famous speech on cosmic rays, which up to that point hadn't been found. On pantyhose and viewmasters were introduced. Do anybody remember what a viewmaster is?
Yes.
Yeah.
The first major public displays of color photographs, air conditioning, and a fax machine. Yes, and there's a viewmaster with
All right.
a little viewmaster disc. And I think the actual one I zoomed in on, this is actually scenes of Toronto on the viewmaster disc. A little more about it. That's a pretty spectacular building, beautiful building for sure. Plan was to demonstrate scientific and technical innovation. Of course, it became more commercial with amusement rides and product sales. RCA chose to introduce television to the mass public at the RCA Pavilion. President Roosevelt's speech and opening ceremonies were broadcast. There was estimated about 1,000 people viewed the Roosevelt broadcast on about 200 total television sets scattered throughout the New York metropolitan area.
Wow.
A TV camera was set up so people could see themselves. There were a lot of skeptics who didn't believe that TV cameras. They also brought over from Europe quite a few famous art and statues. I thought this might be Michelangelo's David. Not quite. His knees are not quite at the right angle, but they did bring over art, very famous art and sculptures for this exposition. The Perisphere. Now, this is a half a football field in diameter, 60 yards, which is 50 yards plus the 10 yards for the end zone. So the inside, the diameter is the diameter of a half a football field. You entered by the world's longest escalator at the time. And there's a moving sidewalk around the inside, and you look down onto Democracy, the city of the future, and on the dome, there was a multi-image slide projection. And then you exited to the pylon. Pylon was a 610-foot tall spire. It's a hybrid of the word triangular pylon. And then you came down this 950-foot spiral ramp that brought visitors back to ground level. A pretty beautiful structure for sure.
Too bad they didn't preserve that.
Yes, they needed the materials for the war. They did say that,
Really?
that they disassembled all the structure to use. There is an interesting time capsule called Time Capsule 1, buried at the World's Fair site, 50 feet deep. It's not meant to be opened for 5 millennia.
Oh
And
my
there's
gosh.
6939. My goodness. 10 feet. There's Time Capsule 2 was put in the 1964 World's Fair, and this one is about 10 feet away. 7.5 feet long, 9 inches diameter, and this one weighs about 800 pounds, quite a bit heavier than the other one. The casing is cupalloy, copper alloy developed just for this time capsule, supposed to resist 5,000 years of corrosion. Some other interesting, now what else is in it? It's filled with nitrogen. It's also filled with 35 small everyday items, a fountain pen, an alphabet block set. You can see the light bulb down here. And this looks like a Westinghouse modern light socket, still the same as what I see now. There's a bit of a lock there. I wonder if that's a camera. There's a baseball, 75 types of fabrics, microfilm with 10 million words, 1,000 pictures, with modern literature, art, the Sears Roebuck catalog, dictionary, and an almanac. and then a small microscope so you can view the microfilm. These are newsreels up here, it looks like. And so there's current events on newsreels and instructions on how to make both a large microfilm viewer and a motion picture projector for the newsreels, if we haven't figured out how to do that by then. Also, other contents included the copies of the Life magazine, a Cupid doll, $1 and change, a pack of Camel cigarettes, a Lily Dichet hat. I guess that's the Hermione equivalent of the time. Included seeds, various seeds. And this is the interesting one of the other things. They included graphics of what's called a mouth map. And it's to illustrate where the different sounds in the English language are produced in the mouth. For example, the H is produced way down in the throat, and all of these other ones, some of them are produced right on your lips, some of them in your back of your throat. So these are where all these sounds ch and d, where these sounds are made in your mouth. That's a fascinating thing, because then they use this with that mouth map. You can sort of figure out how to pronounce these words. If you had any question about how to pronounce, I still don't know what that one is. This is I, meaning me, I, you. And I think the H-I-O might be he, but I'm not sure. And this phonetically is that and this. But these are all graphics that are included in this thing. Young and old, I could be also confused with hairy and bald, but short and tall, black and white. This is what I like this one, because when you do say white, there actually is a bit of an H sound at the front of it. White, white.
Right.
And so they're
Correct.
phonetically doing it as a very interesting way to help showing 1938 English to people of the 70th century. Now, what's the philatelic connection? This is a philatelic connection, obviously. It's this Canadian postcard. No, I love her cover with a nice 1 cent silver jubilee, an 8 cent mufti pear. You don't generally see them paying a 17 cent registered letter rate to Montreal. I couldn't figure out what that 17 cents was. There was no rate for that. But be that as it may, even overweight. On the back, a Cinderella of the New York World Fair. And also a nice California and Vancouver RPO. That one is from an official licensed poster stamp. This is not from this, and well, except for one more. All remaining items in the presentation are not from my personal collection. This is for sale on eBay. If you want to buy, but you have to buy 48 of these complete sheets of 54 stamps in one lot for a couple, well over $1,000. This is actually the first day cover, and the stamp, fairly ordinary first day cover. But what's fascinating about this too is on the at the World's Fair, they had this big engine, a modern engine that was running continuously at 60 miles an hour on a dynamometer while the fair was open. Now, I don't know if I ran it overnight too, or just during daytime hours. It actually ran for 2 seasons. So I presume they would have shut it down between one season and the next, but I don't know if they shut it down from one night to the next morning. There is also a World's Fair cover with an RPO. New York's World's Fair, the Railway Post Office, with an unusual duplex. We call this a duplex because the hammer and the obliterator are all connected. It's one hammer, basically. The date stamp and the and this. Here's another one, and this is why I found it particularly interesting. This is on eBay. It's the World's Fair, but this is a machine RPO cancel, and I've never seen any other company which would have a railway post office machine cancel. And the reason they had a machine cancel is because they had a post office in the railway car. And on the last day of service, this was their railway post office car exhibit. They must have some kind of exhibit. Obviously, this wasn't the train engine that was running. This was just another car. And they list the names of the superintendent and the chief clerk. And these are the other clerks that obviously manned it over the year and a half of operation. But that's where they came from. They must have had a machine on this railway car. oh, and this is one from my collection. I would prefer not first day cover, so I did buy this one on eBay. And it's just because it is postally used and it would go nicely with the Cinderella that I have on cover to show a little bit. But that's by the steamship Aquitania over to Europe. And thanks. This is a picture of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth I at the Canadian Pavilion in New York at 1939. And that's the end.